Joining me this evening on Theater Hour is the recent winner of the New York Times Actress of the Year Award, Jenny Longton. She's currently appearing on Broadway in the spectacular musical Daydreams. Jenny, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dennis. It's a pleasure to be here.
Your life has been rather hectic recently, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yes. I haven't had time to take a breath, honestly, for about 6 months.
Tell us what you're up to.
Well, Daydreams has been running for 3 months now, but I've been working non-stop since I began working on my new movie.
Ah, yes. This is quite a departure for you, isn't it?
Inasmuch as I have never worked in cinema before, yes, it is. I have found it a very rewarding experience.
Very different challenges compared to the theater work.
Oh, totally. But that's been the great thing. From the audition to when we began shooting, it's just been a steep learning curve for me. You don't have time to sit down and think, what am I doing here? I belong in a little theater in Kansas.
Tell us something about this movie.
Well, everyone knows Tom Cruise plays the lead role, but it's a team performance, to tell you the truth. Yeah, Tom is our quarterback, but he has great support all across the field.
What position are you in this football team?
Me? Oh, I carry the sponge to the injured guys. No, seriously, I play one of Tom's wives. I don't want to give too much away, spoil things for the listeners. But Tom isn't exactly a good guy in this movie. He treats me pretty bad and plays around with my head a fair bit.
What was Tom Cruise like to work with?
Oh, listen, you get all these up-and-coming actors and people who just gush away at the big stars and say how wonderful they are. But with Tom, it's been great. He put me at ease from the first take, and you don't ever feel starstruck or, well, that's not exactly true. I was a little in awe on day one. We were out in the desert in Arizona, and I just wanted to ask Tom for his autograph. What an amateur! But he makes it simple, and that was the key for me.
Now, you say you don't want to give too much away, but you could give us a little taster, couldn't you?
Oh, sure. This is a superb, dark mystery in the great tradition of cinema. Leaves you guessing right until the final frame. A lot of twists and turns in the plot. And, I gotta say, some great cinematography, too. I just mentioned Arizona, but we've been moving around in a lot of great areas like Texas, Montana, Oregon, and so on.
Sounds like a bit of a road movie.
Ha! No, but Tom is moving around a lot in the story, mainly to get away from me.
Has the title been confirmed or a release date yet?
The movie is going to be called Choices, and we are looking at a release date around Christmas.
How do you fit in the filming with your work on Daydreams? It can't be possible, can it?
I didn't think so either. What we did was to do my location shots at the start of filming before Daydreams started. Now I am filming either in New York or a little in Chicago, too.
So, you are commuting between New York and Chicago?
Yeah.
Oh, you don't sound...
Well, I mean, it's not ideal. I miss Grace, and Larry isn't...
Your daughter and husband.
Yes. Being married with a child doesn't easily allow for you to be getting up at 5 a.m. for a flight to O'Hare. But we all know this is what I've wanted to do since I can't remember when.
A worthwhile sacrifice, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, sure. The Chicago scenes are almost done now anyway, so I'll be in the Big Apple in a month until the end of shooting.
Now, if we can just switch subjects a little.
Mm-hmm.
You raked up a lot of controversy recently when you criticized Broadway's policy on using women in major productions. Were you surprised at people's reactions to that?
In what way exactly?
Well, it was said you were biting the hand that was feeding you and...
That wasn't fair.
You don't think so?
It was like I was supposed to keep quiet just because I worked there. Come on, get real. I work there, so I have more right than anyone else to make the observations I did. You notice I called them observations and not criticisms.
Observations that were quite, critical.
I am far from being a lone voice in stating this opinion. It just happens that I'm well known, starring in a current musical, performing now in this movie with a star like Tom Cruise, and now the press are interested in what I have to say. Was this point any less valid 2 years ago when I made it?
Which you did.
Oh, yeah, I can find you the article, or rather the square inch that my comments appeared in. Look, I think women are getting a raw deal on Broadway currently, and I would like to see something done to ensure the huge array of very talented female performers at our disposal are given the chance to shine. That's all I want, a level playing field for everyone.
If there are changes to these policies, will you still be around on Broadway or sipping champagne in Hollywood?
Oh no, my heart will always be on the stage. Doing this movie has given me a new aspect to my professional life, but I would never leave that behind. The theater side of me, I mean.
Jenny Longton, as always, it's been great speaking with you. The best of luck with all your projects, and come back and see us as soon as possible.
Thanks for having me on the show, Dennis.
Tonight on Science Tonight, we're joined by Professor Hilary Twain, who works at Yale University and also participates in research on various SETI-related programs for NASA and private organizations. First, Professor, you have to tell us exactly what SETI is, as I feel there's a lot of confusion out there.
Thanks, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here, and above all, to be given this chance to explain to your listeners what my work is about, and more importantly, what it is not about. Many of you will know that SETI stands for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, but it doesn't mean we are standing out in our backyards looking for flying saucers in the sky.
Do you not believe in UFOs?
Me personally? No. I think...
Oh, that surprises me greatly. It's your job, isn't it?
This is where the confusion lies. SETI scientists do not necessarily believe that there are aliens running around on Earth, or, for that matter, that they are flying about your neighborhood in silver discs. Whether I or my colleagues believe in the classic notion of UFOs is immaterial. What we do all believe in is that there is intelligent life out there somewhere in our solar system or in another galaxy, and it is that which we seek, not E.T. in our garden shed.
Okay, that makes things a bit clearer. So a belief in UFOs is not a prerequisite to be able to do your job.
Exactly. We all believe these intelligent civilizations exist, but not all of us believe they have placed a foot on our planet.
Now, what does this search for intelligence consist of? I understand the distances involved are quite staggering, and it's not just a case of picking up the phone.
It is one of the hardest parts of my job as a SETI researcher to get across to people what a difficult task it is trying to find this needle in a haystack. Another of my colleagues, Professor John Turgan, who works for NASA, explained it like this to some kids in a school last year. Imagine you have a single solitary snail sat slap bang in the center of Alaska. He knows there are 2 or 3 other snails sitting on the coast of Alaska, hundreds and hundreds of miles away, and he can't go any faster than, well, we know how slow a snail is.
Yeah, pretty slow. Is that what we face?
Yeah, the snail can set off in one direction, travel for years and years towards a point on the coast before trying another direction.
So we would never find anything like that.
No, precisely. Searching for life on other planets involved an active stance in the 1960s and 1970s. We were actively putting signals out there trying to find the other guys. We sent probes into space with messages on them, with photos and music from Earth on rudimentary picture discs. We even sent out a map of how to find us.
That could be dangerous. These fellows might not be that friendly.
There were many who thought that, but then in the last 20 or so years we have taken up a more passive policy. I mean, we wait and listen out for their signals.
What's the thinking behind that?
Well, there are many reasons why this makes far more sense. First of all, it's a question of logistics. Think of our snail in Alaska again. Instead of trying to guess where his buddy snails are, he can sit back and wait for them to come to him. Also, we are looking for advanced civilizations. It would be nice to find some fungus on Mars or some other planet, but we would ultimately like to find an intelligent civilization, one that was capable of long-distance interstellar communication and possibly travel.
So that is why we listen.
Pretty much, yes. We have been emanating radio and TV waves into space for about 70 years. Any civilization within 70 light years of Earth, and that's quite a few stars, believe me, would have been made aware of our presence by now. We are simply looking for the same telltale signs coming from other planets and star systems.
Okay, that makes sense. But so far it seems we have found nothing.
Well, in a word, yes, that's true. A famous SETI scientist once said many years ago something to the effect of, if these guys are out there in such great numbers as many of us believe, where are they? It's quite worrying, the total silence, and it's quite easy to begin to think that we might actually be alone here.
Do you personally believe that?
No, not really.
So, how would you explain the silence?
It could be any of a whole list of things. We may be looking in the wrong place. We may not have the technology to pick up whatever is being broadcast by civilizations more advanced than us. Would we have been able to pick up radio waves in the days of Jefferson and Washington?
Is it also true that any advanced civilization in our corner of the universe may not be around anymore?
That is another interesting theory. What, in the end, is the lifespan of an advanced civilization? Maybe these extraterrestrial intelligences got so smart that they destroyed themselves. You only need to look at ourselves to see that possibility. We have only been what one might call advanced for a matter of a century or two, and look at environmental damage, nuclear proliferation, and overpopulation. Yeah, it's a distinct possibility that any life form may only be at our level of advancement for a relatively short time.
Pretty depressing when you think about it.
I'm optimistic. The universe is a staggeringly large place, and we have only scanned our galaxy, really. When you think that there are as many galaxies in the observable universe as there are grains of sand on Earth, it makes you realize we have a lot of real estate to get through yet.
What's the first question you would ask the little green men?
Oh, good question. Well, I think I would ask how they survived. I mean, referring back to what we were talking about before, how did you get past the stage of being capable, technologically speaking, of destroying yourselves, something we are struggling with today? And how did you feed an ever-expanding population? And how did you ultimately control that population without destroying the environment of your home planet? Just that.
Well, you cheated as I only gave you one question to ask.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Professor Hilary Twain, it's been an entertaining and educational talk this evening. Be sure to come back and tell us if E.T. does phone you.
You'll be the first to know. Thanks for having me here tonight.
Today on Business Bulletin, we will be speaking to Dan Johnson-Smith, who runs Animal Appetite. Now, this company, well, Dan, welcome to the show. Why don't you explain to our listeners exactly what it is you do?
Hi, Janice. Well, basically, we call ourselves animal caterers, or pet caterers would, I think, be a more accurate term.
Pet caterers?
Yep. We prepare high-quality, nutritious food for people's pets, and we've been doing so with increasing success for about 2 years.
Now, some of our listeners may be a little skeptical, Dan.
I was too when my wife first suggested this idea to me.
Does she help you with the enterprise?
Yes, it's a two-person operation. My wife, Carol, she deals with the food side of things, ensuring that our products meet the highest standards of nutrition and, very importantly, I feel, making sure each of our products is suitable for the animal it is intended for. Too many companies have a business model based on mass production being the most cost-effective, but we individually cater our food products for different animals.
So, you have meat for the dogs, fish for the cats, nuts and seeds for the parrots?
Oh, we go way beyond that, Janice. When we say individually cater, we mean exactly what we say. Different breeds of dog have different nutritional requirements, and we do our best to meet those requirements. A Labrador will prosper and grow healthy on food which is slightly different to that which you feed a poodle, for example.
Oh, I never realized.
Yeah, it's true. And not only that, but we go through an extensive consultation period with each of our customers when they first get in touch with us. We deal with over 40 different types of animal at Animal Appetite. A particular dog may have a history of being overweight, or have heart problems, or be diabetic, or may have an allergy to certain products.
Are cats and dogs allergic to food?
Oh, for sure they are. They're complex biological machines in much the same way we are. It's just that you or I can go and see our doctors every 6 months and have our diet examined and our blood tested, so we find out these things, whereas cats and dogs will eat something that reacts to their body, and we may never know about it unless it gets serious. So we run some basic tests on all animals when we start working with a customer.
What kinds of allergies do you find?
Well, many types, ranging from sugar to pollen. It's amazing, really. We had an old English sheepdog that couldn't eat meat, a Siamese cat that couldn't eat fish.
Really? A cat that can't eat fish?
Well, we discovered it was only certain types of fish in the end. Very complex business, I can tell you.
Okay, well, take us through the process. Someone gets in touch with Animal Appetite. Then what?
The first thing we do is go and see the animal or animals. We run some basic tests to see if the food we would normally prepare for that type of animal will cause problems or not. We speak to the owners to find out the medical history of the animal, any problems with the heart or liver or whatever, and then we start the deliveries.
Okay, well, this is the part that fascinates me. So, do you turn up to these people's houses with great silver platters like you would for a wedding reception?
No, it's nothing like that. We make deliveries to our customers' houses every 3 or 4 days for a cat or dog. In this way, we ensure that the food is always fresh. We don't want to be selling stale food to anyone. These animals get the best food on offer. That is why the owners come to us. So every few days we will drive around in our truck. It's a big white thing with the cutest Animal Appetite slogan down the side. You may have seen it.
I may have, yes.
And we don't have a silver platter. It's usually a picnic type hamper, come to think of it.
You don't bring the cutlery and crockery too, do you?
No, the owners will use their usual bowls and things for their own pets. We only bring the food.
Okay, now, before you mentioned that you have over 40 types of animals on the books at Animal Appetite, did you mean breeds of cats and dogs?
Oh no, I mean, it's true that cats and dogs do make up around 60% of our income, but the other 40% is a veritable Noah's Ark of other creatures, both great and small.
For example?
Where to start? We have a couple of goats, a badger, an otter, a few horses and donkeys. And then we have a lot of smaller animals such as parrots, pigeons, hamsters, lizards, and, well, the list goes on. I'm thinking of opening a zoo.
Wow, that's a lot of animals. I can't believe people are keeping horses and goats in the city, though.
You'd be surprised. Well, it's true a lot of the larger animals are out of town on larger plots of land, but you would be surprised to see what some people have right here under your nose in the city.
Now, Dan, you said that Animal Appetite had been going for some 2 years or more. Where did you get the idea from, and how hard was it to bring it to fruition?
My wife Carol had the idea when we were looking after these 6 husky dogs for a friend of mine who was away on vacation. He was actually in Alaska with his wife and kids, and the irony was not lost on me. There I was with his pack of huskies, and he was in the snow and ice of Alaska. Anyway, the job was a lot more involved than I thought, and a lot harder than my good friend had made out. We spent a very intense 2 weeks with those dogs, and I couldn't believe how careful you had to be with pedigree dogs like that, and of course not only with pedigrees.
And you were bitten by the bug, so to speak.
Yeah, it was hard work, but most enjoyable, and I just got to think about how many animals were being fed poorly. And you know what they say? We say, you are what you eat, and that is as true for pets as for us owners. So Carol, she says to me, hey, you can do this. Why don't you try and do this for a living? And you know, I'd just been made redundant from the local software company.
Oh, yes, ZLT Systems. I remember when it went bust a few years back.
Well, best thing that ever happened to me, Janice. I mean it. That spell of unemployment gave me some perspective. And now, here I am with the best job I've ever had. I wake up in the morning and I can't wait to get to work.
Okay, that is so great. Now, you said Carol was the food guru in your partnership.
Yep, she does the cooking, so to speak. I deal with all deliveries and doing the books. I'm the accountant and the delivery boy. If we go to jail for tax evasion, that'll be down to me.
And the name of your business? I love it, Animal Appetite. Was that you or Carol who thought of that?
Oh, neither. That was Patsy, our 7-year-old daughter. Well, she's 7 now, but she was only 5 at the time. So to think that she had come up with this superb idea for a name at 5 years of age, well, it's remarkable. We were coming to our wits' end thinking up a name, I can tell you.
Dan Johnson Smith, founder of Animal Appetite and self-proclaimed tax expert. Thank you so much for coming on the show this afternoon.
It's been great talking to you and your listeners.
Have you ever been out on a boat in the middle of a calm lake, felt the soft breeze in your hair, and felt it gently rock your boat? It's difficult to think of anything more relaxing, isn't it? But for my guest tonight on Special People, Jane Walters, being becalmed on any stretch of water in a boat would bring rushing back memories of a terrifying experience she encountered last year in the Pacific Ocean. Jane, am I right in thinking my lake image did not comfort you at all?
Hi, Edward. No, it pains me still to think of myself out on the water in any type of situation similar to that which you described.
Could you tell our listeners what happened to you?
Well, basically, I had crossed the Pacific west to east and was bound for Panama. 1,000 miles west of Panama, my yacht, the Belle Trieste, hit what I can only assume was either a whale or a log floating in the water. It was 4 o'clock in the morning and I couldn't see a thing.
So the yacht was holed.
Oh yes, I started taking on water immediately. You just can't believe the utter panic that grips you in a situation like that. I realized I had about 2 to 3 minutes to get off the boat, onto my life raft with as much useful equipment as I could possibly manage, but I made a big mistake.
Oh?
I threw into the lifeboat a few extra supplies on top of what was always stored there. You know, the lifeboat is there already stocked up as a time saver. I threw in a few extra things, but I forgot the most important thing, which was my GPS device.
Now, Could you explain what GPS is for our listeners, Jane?
Yeah, sure. Now, GPS stands for Global Positioning System. It uses a network of satellites in orbit around the Earth to pinpoint the exact position of everybody who has a GPS set. Down to a couple of meters, it can know where you are. So it's obviously a really useful tool for people such as sailors, trekkers, and the like, if you have it with you.
I would have thought there would have been a device with GPS in the life raft.
Yes, there was, but I had taken it out 2 days previously to check something, and I had really stupidly forgotten to put it back. It was negligence of the highest order, and it almost cost me my life. The Belle Trieste sank and took 2 fully operational GPS devices with her to the bottom of the ocean. And I was left with an 8-foot life raft and enough supplies for about a week, which I thought would suffice.
I can't imagine how terrifying an experience it would be out there, in the middle of nowhere on a small boat. Didn't you feel absolutely powerless, Jane?
Not so much, actually. Us sailors are well used to the rigors of being in the middle of nowhere, as you put it. I was certainly concerned about the GPS device. I thought things were going to be a lot trickier without that. But I can't say I lost my cool, lost control of the situation. I was pretty calm considering the great danger that I had just been thrust into.
Right. So you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean in a boat little longer than the height of an NBA player. I heard you talk earlier, before we came on air, about the rather unfortunate fact, that you had sunk your yacht in the worst possible place in the ocean. I mean, for me, believe me, anywhere further than 50 yards from the beach is the worst possible place. But I mean, you're a sailor with, 10, 20 years experience? And yet you knew you'd been dealt an unlucky hand.
I was slap bang in the middle of a huge area of ocean known as the doldrums.
Sounds pretty depressing.
Well, exactly. That's where we get the expression from, to be in the doldrums. It's a vast expanse of sea around the equator where all the Earth's winds sort of cancel each other out, and you can have day upon day of dead calm. The sea resembles a mirror, and it can rain continuously for days, too. It's a very depressing, draining place to be in. Sailors need wind, and if that precious resource is suddenly cut off, you're left feeling totally powerless, becalmed in a frustrating situation you can't do anything about.
So that heightened the danger for you, I take it?
Well, yes. I knew there were some shipping routes, some cargo shipping lanes way to the north of where I was, but we're talking some 120 miles, which I admit doesn't sound too far, but I was on the oceanic equivalent of a mill pond, and I wasn't about to paddle 120 miles in the 7 days for which I had supplies. But of course, I had to.
I always thought wind and wave were a sailor's worst enemies, and yet you were in a gravely dangerous situation through the lack of these natural forces.
I was going to starve to death or die of thirst. I had 5 days' worth of food and 6 days' worth of water if I rationed myself pretty severely. But even at that point, I wasn't too concerned, as the doldrums is famous for its rain too, as well as its lengthy calms and lack of wind. So I have to say, I told myself, right, Jane, at least you have enough to drink. It'll be the ultimate diet. I'll lose like 30 pounds and be able to fit into my graduation dress again. I tried to make light of it all.
And I suppose your mental state, your psychological fitness, if we might call it that, it's crucial in a situation like that, wouldn't you say?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. You need to keep positive. Keep thinking that a Panamanian tanker will be the next thing over the horizon, that some Costa Rican Coast Guard plane was about to fly over me. I would find myself hearing the phantom engines of planes for hours at a time. The mind plays pretty strange tricks on a person in a stressful situation, and I was desperate, desperately scanning skies for signs of planes that weren't there.
At what stage did you start to panic?
I have to say I began to lose hope after 11 days. My food was pretty much all used up, and there had been half an hour of light rain in all that time, absolutely unheard of in the doldrums. I was by then overdue into Panama by a few days, and I knew the authorities would probably have been contacted and that maybe they were looking for me, but I knew I had drifted further south too, and was by now perhaps 100 or 200 miles from where the Belle Trieste had gone down, and ever further from those all-important shipping lanes. Yeah, it was after about 11 days that I first began to contemplate the possibility, that hidden doubt that creeps up on you in the dark of the night, that fear that perhaps I wasn't going to get out of this after all.
What did you do? Did you pray? Did you look back on your life? Did you play through your memories? I can't imagine the sheer dread that must have been coursing through your body at that time.
You know, Edward, what I did? I cried a lot. I cried at my own stupidity. I cried for the fact that I was going to die in horrible circumstances because I had taken the GPS device out of my life raft. I cried, too, for the fact that I could precious afford to be crying and wasting what little water I had.
And then, enter the story an angel.
My angel, my Angelo Ortega, brilliant pilot with the Panamanian Coast Guard. He had been looking for me for 2 days and had returned to the area 5 times, flying outward spirals from my last known position. When he spotted me, and I was totally oblivious to the fact there was a plane flying a mere 2,000 feet above me, he had about 4 minutes of flying time left in his fuel tanks and was readying to turn for home. I must have been unconscious or delirious at the time.
It was a miracle, wasn't it?
It really was. If he hadn't seen my little boat at exactly that moment, he would have turned for home and another plane would have taken over the search in a different area of the ocean, some 15 miles to the west. You know, they've shown me the grid of the area, the map of their search plan. My sector of the ocean where I was found, they weren't going back to for another good while. I would have been out there and heading southwards into a huge empty area of ocean that would have seen me clear of the shipping lanes for about 3 weeks. I would have died. It's as simple as that.
And they had flown over you once before, I heard.
I can't believe there I was scanning the skies for planes that didn't exist, and it's now emerged that a pilot flew over me at 6,000 feet on the 7th day.
So, how were you finally rescued?
Angelo came down and flew over the life raft at about 200 feet. Damn near scared the life out of me, I can tell you. I was beyond speechless with joy. It was like winning 5 lotteries at the same time. Then he flew away and I felt empty, even though I knew inside I was saved. A few hours later, a fishing boat from Costa Rica passed by, and they took me on board.
What's next for you, Jane?
I'm going back to Panama. Let's just say I've made a new friend who works for the Panama Coast Guard.
Oh, really? Well, this is an unexpected turn to the story.
Angelo is going to teach me how to fly. He says it's safer than sailing.
Jane Waters, thank you for your moving story this evening. We wish you all the very best in whatever the future holds for you.
Thanks, Edward. It's been a pleasure.
Good evening. My name is Jenny Fowler, and I would like to welcome all our listeners to Net News, your weekly program dealing with all matters online. Tonight, we are fortunate to be joined by David Akris, head of the internet security company WebBlock. Now, this evening, we are going to be talking specifically about matters related to email, such as spam, and the latest fear to grip the online community, the strange phenomenon which goes by the name of phishing. David, welcome to Net News.
Good evening, Jenny.
Right. What I would really like to know first from you, David, is this. How on earth can I reduce the amount of spam mail I find every morning in my inbox? I think things are getting absolutely ridiculous. I mean, this morning there must have been about 30 to 40 emails covering everything from having won the lottery to purchasing things I would rather not mention on this show. What can a normal email user such as myself do to combat this ever-growing problem?
Now, there are a couple of strategies that we can employ to reduce this admittedly annoying problem. First of all, you have to be really guarded about where you leave your email address. Of course, you give it to all your friends, and you give it to contacts you have through your workplace, although I would also add as a strong recommendation that you have separate personal and work email accounts. But what you must not do is to navigate around the internet leaving your email address for everyone and his brother to find, because believe me, there is no shortage of unscrupulous individuals out there who will harvest your email address among the thousands of others, either for their own personal gain or to sell to third parties.
Wow, I didn't realize it was so simple.
It's actually worse than that. There are little software programs called spiders that trawl around the internet on their own looking for email addresses. So your email address, left innocently on that cookery message board, doesn't even need to be seen by human eyes to be gathered. If any of your listeners are using what we call throwaway email addresses, provided by companies such as Yahoo or Hotmail, then I would recommend creating a new email account and starting over.
That sounds like worthwhile advice, David. You have spoken to us about how we can prevent our email addresses falling into the wrong hands. What can we do to alleviate the spam problem if this has already occurred, beyond creating a new account, which may not be practical for all of our listeners? Is there anything we can do to fight back against the spammers?
Sure. There are a variety of handy anti-spam tools out there on the market. Your ISP, that is your Internet Service Provider, will most likely have one of the main anti-spam filters active on all their users' accounts.
Tell me about these filters. I think I need to get one.
Without going into too much technical detail, spam filter software will analyze all incoming messages and flag, divert, or delete emails that it considers to be spam. This may be because the message contains certain words. I think we all know what types of words I'm talking about here. Or the email may have other qualities which marks it out to be spam in all likelihood, such as large blue or red font, lack of return address, too much capitalization, and a whole list of other considerations.
But that doesn't mean we have to ask our friends never to write emails to us in blue. I would be very concerned about legitimate emails being deleted.
Oh, absolutely. An anti-spam filter will only flag an email message as spam if several of these factors are found to be present in a particular message. If your Aunt Kathy chooses to write to you in blue, but the message is otherwise perfectly normal, it will not be considered spam. These filters are great because users are often given control over the sensitivity level.
We've had a call from Margaret in Boston wanting to know if these anti-spam filters can also help in preventing her computer from being infected by a computer virus. Now, David, these are two different issues, I believe, aren't they?
Yes, many computer users do in fact manage to infect their PCs by opening attachments in emails, but these could easily come from people they know who have unwittingly sent them infected files. The best advice I can give in the area of viruses is not to open any attachments that arrive unexpectedly. And of course, to always have an up-to-date antivirus program installed on your computer.
We now move on to an issue we mentioned at the beginning of the program, phishing. What is it and how can we best protect ourselves from it?
First of all, we should explain that even though the pronunciation is the same, this variety of phishing is spelt with a PH and not an F. Right, phishing is quite a recent phenomenon, but can be very damaging if users are not very aware of the dangers that exist. If you get an email that claims to be from, let's say, your bank, and asks you to click on a link, visit a site, and enter information such as your account number, password, or username, you can be certain that you have been a victim of phishing.
Does this only affect bank customers, David?
Not at all. Any service which requires online access and a password can be targeted, so online stores or auction sites have also fallen foul of this. The good news is that avoiding phishing is as simple as you could imagine. Don't ever, and I mean never, reply to any email that asks for personal information of this type. The authentic sites would never request this information from you via email, so you can be certain that any email such as this is a fraudulent attempt to gain sensitive information from you.
David, it's been very informative to have you here speaking to us today. A little understanding of these issues can help us see the world of email and the internet isn't so sinister after all. Please come back and see us soon, won't you?
I'd be delighted. Thanks very much for inviting me to speak to your listeners.
Welcome to the February edition of Our World. My name is Mike Kuplowski. Our main focus tonight will be on pollution. Later on, we will be speaking about pollution from oil spills which have recently been in the news. But first, we're going to talk about a type of pollution which many people have not even heard of. Susan Conroy is the press liaison officer for the Canadian Darker Skies Association and is here tonight to talk to us about a problem that has been estimated to cost between 1/4 and 1/3 of global energy output. Susan, those figures can't be correct, can they?
Many independent organizations have costed this phenomenon of light pollution, and the figures usually come out in that area. Somewhere between 25 and 35% of total energy costs are being completely wasted by wasteful or inefficient use of lighting, especially in the more urbanized areas of the richer countries of the world. Light pollution is one of the most pervasive forms of pollution in the modern world, and yet it is something that very few people know much about, even though, conversely, it is the form of pollution that people come into contact with most often on a daily basis.
Could you just give us a few ideas of what, in your mind, constitutes light pollution? I understand one of the most serious problems is that of light escaping up into the skies above our cities, with the resulting glare preventing us from seeing all the stars that were once visible.
That is what I would term a symptom of the problem, and not necessarily the most serious consequence. I would recommend your listeners, if they live in what is termed a built-up area, to go outside after listening to this great program, of course, and to look up into the sky. I would be surprised if any of them managed to see more than 5 to 10 stars. If they had done this 20 years ago, then they would be talking about hundreds and hundreds. This is a problem that is getting worse. The whole light pollution situation is deteriorating, which means we are wasting more and more money. If I may, I would like to give you just a couple of figures which illustrate this light pollution problem very well.
Of course, go ahead.
The International Dark Sky Association has estimated that here in the USA, $1.5 billion is spent every year generating electricity for light, which is then wasted. That's the equivalent of about 6 million tons of coal to produce that electricity, just wasted. The United States' reliance on imports of oil could be reduced in a matter of months if a few basic regulations were introduced and enforced.
What causes this light pollution, Susan? Is it just badly positioned streetlights that shine up into the sky?
Well, that is true. It is a major contributory factor in all of this. Light pollution is not only light that is shining up into the sky, which blocks out the stars we were just talking about. Light pollution is also when areas are overlit. For example, or lighting is badly designed or badly positioned, which then creates excessive glare. This can obviously be dangerous if drivers are affected.
I know so many people are worried about security, and I imagine this is why huge areas of our cities are, in your words, overlit.
Many studies have shown there is little connection between lighting and crime. Besides, much of the lighting which is badly designed creates very strong light and shadow contrasts, which, strangely enough, actually creates good hiding place for the very criminals we would like to be protected from.
So what changes would you like to see implemented, Susan?
There are some very basic things that can be changed. There needs to be a standard for street lighting, which eliminates completely above horizontal light escape. By that I mean we can't continue to use inefficient street lighting equipment, which enables a lot of the light emitted to escape upwards into the sky. That is the first priority. Next, we need tough restrictions on how much light is used to illuminate a given area. That way we avoid the problem of what is called light trespass, where light escapes from the area that it is supposed to illuminate and goes, for instance, into nearby windows or roads.
It's funny you should mention that. My brother lives near a parking lot, and he says at night he doesn't even need to switch on his kitchen light because the light from the parking lot lighting is so strong.
This is what we are saying. We don't have a problem with security lighting in any number of parking lots, stores, or even sports centers. And this is important, but the lighting needs to be suitable and, above all, directed correctly. We are becoming a society obsessed with turning night into day. But I can tell you now, not everybody finds this situation satisfactory.
Susan, if we can now turn to what we as individuals can do to lessen the problem or at least not add to it. This is clearly something in which government and business have a very big contribution to make. But is there something we can do ourselves?
Well, first of all, I would recommend writing to your local representatives, as this is an issue which needs as much support as possible. Then there are things we can do in our own home. If you use lighting, be it security lighting or lighting for your barbecue in the garden, just make sure it is well directed, by which I mean angled downwards, and in that the light source itself, the bulb I mean, has a good cover on it. If you are using a security light, you want it to illuminate the area immediately in front of your house and not your neighbor's house or half the rest of the street. Doing this will not make your house safer. If you want to illuminate the front of your house for any reason, do it from above, with a light fixture attached to the gutter of your roof, for example, and not using a powerful spotlight placed on the lawn in front of your house. Most of the light in this setup will just go into the sky, and all of the amateur astronomers among you will continue to get frustrated as you search the sky for stars.
Well, I for one have learned a lot this evening, and you have given us a lot of food for thought the next time we look up into an increasingly orange sky at night. Susan Conroy, thanks for your time tonight.
You're welcome.
Have you seen this story in the Herald? It says the Times is closing down in 3 months' time.
Ben, that's good news. That newspaper is terrible. I won't miss it.
What do you mean? The Times is the best newspaper in the city. If that closes, we'll only have the Herald and that city journal, which is too awful for words.
You only like the Times because it takes up to 20 pages every day with sports. This is a newspaper which puts the horoscopes on the bottom of the front page. I think that tells you how serious it is.
Come on, that's hardly fair now, is it? Remember the campaign they did last year to save the Children's Hospital? You can't tell me you didn't think that was a worthwhile thing to do.
They only did that because they knew it would strike a nerve with the average guy in the street. You know, saving a children's hospital. It's like the ultimate in populist journalism. Do you remember reading their article a couple of months before, criticizing the local authorities wasting money on out-of-date healthcare facilities, including the very same children's hospital? They have only ever written what they think will sell more newspapers.
Well, it obviously didn't work if they're closing, did it?
No, and thank heavens for that. The City Journal is a great paper, and you don't like it because it doesn't devote 5 pages every day to baseball stats.
This is a baseball city. We've got a great team. Why shouldn't we read about it? Where are we going to get the results now? The Journal puts all the results in one tiny box on the back page, and the Herald gives them maybe a half page. It's almost as if they feel ashamed at having a successful team here. I just don't see why people buy the journal.
Maybe because it has authentic journalists working there, journalists who know something about what is going on in the rest of the country and the rest of the world. I think a newspaper needs to meet all the needs of its readers, not just those who like sports. The Journal did a great piece on famine in Africa last week. Did you read it?
No, I can't say I did. I think they should leave that stuff for the national newspapers or the TV news. If I buy a local newspaper, I don't want to read about the famine in Africa. Those articles are only written by the ambitious journalists who are fishing for jobs in the national press.
Oh, you're so cynical.
And another thing, what about the jobs section in the Times? That was one of the most useful parts of it. 3 or 4 pages of good quality jobs, and always local. The Herald has one too. Look, here on page 17, 1 page. And look, half of these jobs are on the other side of the state. Every business, every store in this city knows if they want to employ someone, get someone to work for them, they have to place an ad in the Times. How are all these people going to get work now? This will absolutely wreck the local economy.
You certainly know how to exaggerate, Ben. Destroy the local economy, will it? I admit the job section was pretty good in the Times, but one of the other 2 newspapers will just get the ads instead. That's how things work. This city just isn't big enough for 3 local newspapers, and you know it. People only get them to see what's on in town and to see who's died.
That's so morbid.
It's true. People use the TV or the internet for everything else. It's not like it used to be 10 years ago.
The Times was the cheapest of them all, too. You can bet all the prices are going to go up.
You could be right. I think the Times' low price was the only thing keeping the Journal and the Herald from increasing their prices. I don't buy a local paper that often, to be honest. If I do get one, I find myself reading no more than a few pages anyway.
Well, if the Times really does close down, that's my newspaper buying days finished. I think in 10 years' time, nobody in this city will even buy a local paper. It's a shame, really, don't you think?
My dad told me when he was a kid there used to be 5 local newspapers in the city, and 2 others serving only this corner of the state. But you know how it is. Companies merge, everyone is looking for savings, efficiency, and so on. Now we'll only have 2. It's survival of the fittest.
Welcome to Motoring Week. My name is Beth Williams, and we have a full program for you this afternoon. Later on, we'll be taking a look at the very latest arrivals on the in-car satellite navigation market and talking exclusively to the head of mechanics in the Ferrari Formula One team. But first, today, we will be speaking about the phenomenon that has, at some time or other, affected us all: road rage. You know the deal. Some reckless, thoughtless motorist cuts in front of you on the highway or pulls out without looking, and all of a sudden, the red mist descends and we seem to lose control of our thoughts and actions. Neil Adamson from the Northwest Motoring Association is here to speak to us today about road rage in general, but in particular about a survey his organization has just carried out. Neil, welcome to the show.
Hi, Beth.
First off, I have to ask you, do you ever feel road rage when you are out driving?
No, I don't. Thankfully, I managed to keep control of myself while behind the wheel, although our survey's findings show that many of the motorists we encounter on the roads are only one minor accident away from losing their cool.
Right. Tell us something about your findings, Neil.
We asked the question, have you ever felt like getting out of your car and confronting a driver you consider to be at fault for an accident or traffic incident? We were astonished to find that some 68% answered in the affirmative, and some 23% actually had left their vehicle for some incident or another.
Wow, Those figures are high. There's clearly a lot of risk involved in acting like that, wouldn't you say?
Let's put it this way. Every year, some 40,000 motorists die on American roads. We have estimated that somewhere between 1/2 and 2/3 of those deaths occur in accidents which have some element of aggressive driving involved. It's been calculated that as many as 1/3 of these aggressive driving-related accidents involve a motor vehicle being used deliberately as a weapon.
So the definition of road rage goes beyond what a lot of our listeners might assume. That is, for drivers to get angry at the maneuvers of another motorist and to physically confront them outside the vehicle.
Road rage clearly involves that type of incident. Only last week in LA, a father of 3 was shot when he left his vehicle to remonstrate with a motorist who had changed lanes carelessly and almost caused a collision. You'll find people are more and more wary of leaving their vehicles. People are quite often so afraid of road rage, carjacking, so on, that they lock themselves in their vehicles and nothing will convince them to leave. But, and here's the big but, road rage also includes staying in your vehicle but using it as a weapon against someone you consider to have slighted you in whatever way. Most of the road rage incidents we have looked into have involved motorists aggressively pursuing other cars with their own and often smashing into them to drive them off the road or just get a little bit of revenge for a perceived insult. The situation is getting out of control.
What do you think is contributing to this problem, Neil? Are people just becoming more aggressive and ruder in their everyday dealings with other people on the streets? When I knew you were coming on the show to speak to us about this problem, I asked my father if he could remember incidents similar to the modern phenomenon of road rage, and he said you wouldn't get much more than someone honking the horn loudly. We seem to have taken it all to another new, dangerous level.
I think there are a lot of socio-economic reasons behind this huge increase in aggressive driving behavior we're seeing. Here is one statistic you might find interesting. In the last 20 years or so, the number of miles of American highways has increased something like 1%, which is, of course, a tiny amount. However, in the same time period, there's been something like a whopping 40% increase in vehicle numbers.
And I suppose the result of that is even greater competition for physical space on the roads and a consequent rise in stress levels among drivers.
Absolutely. Our roads are getting clogged up to an ever-increasing extent. Travel times are taking longer, and people are sitting in near-stationary vehicles, getting very hot and bothered. This not only means people are more likely to react in a negative way when confronted by what is perceived to be inconsiderate other drivers, but it also means that, given 50 yards of clear road, drivers are more likely to cut in front of others, run red lights and so on, in an effort to make up for lost time in a way. That doesn't make it something we can condone, but it does help us to try and understand some of the motives that lie behind this trend.
What can be done in the way of driver education to try and combat this problem, Neil? My own son is attending driver's ed at high school at the moment, and I have to say that the amount of time being devoted to this particular problem is minimal.
You're right. This whole issue has to be taken into the public education system. But we also need constant education through the medium of police warnings or TV and radio messages. People have to understand that using 1 ton of steel automobile as a weapon, especially at high speeds, can have absolutely catastrophic results. Let me tell you about one tragic case. I spent last Tuesday with a very polite, soft-spoken young man up in Oregon State Penitentiary, who's currently serving a 74-year sentence for 5 counts of third-degree murder. He had been waiting at a red light when a mother with her 4 daughters pulled up in front of him in a large off-road vehicle. Now, this guy was pretty ticked off that she hadn't waited behind him. It's a situation I see from my downtown office window 50 times a day, and this story goes to show what can result when tempers are short and nerves are frayed. So the guy chases the mom and her kids and ends up pushing them off the road where unfortunately they crashed through a row of trees and into a river some 60 feet below the road.
My word, that's just awful.
Well, yes, it is. Unforeseen consequences is an expression I've heard more times than I can tell you. A car travelling at 60 miles per hour will impart a huge amount of force, and these unforeseen circumstances do happen very often. Now, this prisoner's life has been destroyed, and he told me last week to mention his case on this afternoon's show. I suppose to try and illustrate how 10 seconds of road rage can destroy lives all round, not only those of the victims in the car, but also that of the perpetrator.
Neil, what advice could you give to our listeners? We've just had an email from Hank in Sacramento saying he had a guy pull a knife on him this morning when he gestured to get out of his car at a stop sign. The world's gone nuts, is his final thought on the matter.
We have to make allowances. We live in such a rushed world that we're asking for problems if we always leave for work at the last possible moment. I give myself 20 minutes for a drive that usually takes 10. If I arrive 10 minutes early, I go and get a coffee in the restaurant across the street. If we continue to live our lives right at the limit, then when things go a little awry, which of course they do, then we find ourselves getting frustrated and likely to release that fury on the first person to cross us. In your Father's Day, people also drove badly, but I just don't think there was this fuel of anger ready to fan the flames.
Neil Adamson from the Northwest Motoring Association, thanks for joining us today. If any of our listeners would like further information about this really important issue, contact us and we'll send you our information packet for today's program.
Good evening. This is David Hopkins with this week's Film Fanatics. Later we'll be going to Poland to see what's going on in the Warsaw Film and Television Festival, and I'm very happy to have the screenwriter Daniel Atherston with us, and he'll be talking to us about his latest work, the all-star thriller Angel Eyes. But first, we have our weekly chat with the critics Jonathan Reed and Sally Mendes. Jonathan, Sally, welcome back as always. Tell us which movies you've been to see this week.
Good evening, everyone, first of all. We went to see the new British comedy Helter Skelter.
And good evening from me. Our second film was a thriller called Time Out.
Okay, well, we'll start with Helter Skelter. Jonathan, there have been quite a few successful comedies coming out of the UK in recent years. Will this be another one?
No, well, I don't think so. I found it to be pretty poor, to be honest. I mean, I'll just give you a quick synopsis of what the movie is about first. Helter Skelter is about a university student who believes he is hearing Charles Manson's voice in his head.
Charles Manson being?
Right. Well, for some of our younger listeners, they may not know who he is. Charles Manson was a particularly nasty killer who was responsible for some horrific murders at the end of the 60s. And, by the way, he claimed to have gained inspiration from the Beatles, and in particular their song Helter Skelter, which was released in 1968. So, as I was saying, the movie has quite a morbid background, you could say.
Sally, tell us some more about this central student character.
Yes, well, as Jonathan says, you have this university guy who claims to be hearing Charles Manson's voice in his head, but he tells him to do some very oddball things and nothing murderous at all. The comedy comes, or rather is supposed to come, from the terror of those that live and work with Barry, which is the name of the main character. He gets up to a lot of perfectly innocent things, but from the outside, it seems as if he's about to set off on some killing spree. And of course, most of this fear comes from the fact that Barry goes around telling everyone that Charles Manson is talking to him. I don't want to talk too much about what Barry is told to do or allegedly told to do by Manson, as this would ruin the film somewhat. Suffice it to say, there is some pretty funny physical humor and some crazy situational comedy.
I would agree with Sally that some of the visual gags are hilarious, but I just felt the script was pretty weak. You know, it's a comedy, and it has to make you laugh. I chuckled a few times at some of the slapstick physical stuff, but I just found the verbal side of things not strong enough. And the longer a comedy goes without making you laugh, you just start to feel almost embarrassed that there's something you're not understanding, that you're not getting the film.
Yes, I would certainly go along with that. I think the film has great potential apart from the poor writing and, as Jonathan said before, a pretty grisly background with the Manson connections and so on.
Who's in this movie? Anyone we know?
Chris Reed gives a pretty convincing performance as Barry Jones, the student at the center of all this craziness. We won't have seen him much before, as he's only made a few sitcom performances on UK television. His best buddy in the movie is played by a much older Stan Henson, who we saw last year in the wonderful romance The Empty Page.
Yes, you say older, I think too old. It was almost like watching a father-son relationship up on the screen. I don't see it as a plot hole, though, as he could have well been a mature student. But I think Henson is around 40, and it didn't sit well with me having a supposed friend being so much older. I think Barry's mother in the film, Gladys, played by Cynthia Marshall, was absolutely wonderful.
I couldn't agree more.
She just seemed to breathe life and vigor into every scene she played. How she wasn't given a larger role, I'll never understand. Her last performance was in the American drama Bank Drop about 2 years ago. And to be honest, her performance in that was a little jaded, but she has come right back on song in this movie.
Yes, I think she played the role just right and came across as this poor, confused woman whose life has been turned upside down. You could totally feel her pain, and her acting was just spot on.
Absolutely.
I've heard the cinematography is something pretty special, too.
Oh, yes, that's true. I wasn't particularly keen on the film, in all honesty, but yes, the scenery was wonderful. I don't know how realistic this is, but apparently this university is located in a huge area of wonderful, wild, natural beauty with waterfalls, moors, and gorgeous pine forests all around. It was something to look at least.
Okay, now we move to our second film, the American thriller Time Out. What did you think, Sally?
This made a pleasant change from Helter Skelter. As Jonathan was saying before, we spent most of that movie waiting to laugh, and it never really happened. But this film delivers. It promises to get you hiding behind your couch, or at least your popcorn, and it really delivers thrills and scares by the bucket load.
I have to say I really enjoyed this movie. There were plot twists and turns on a regular basis that keep you guessing until the very end, and, might I say, even after the credits have rolled.
Wow, that sounds like a very positive endorsement from the both of you. What's it about, Sully?
Good question. This movie is very hard to summarize, believe me. Basically, it begins with a man traveling home on the bus shortly after having lost his job, and he runs into an old friend who he hasn't seen in like 20 years or more. And they get talking and find out that neither of them is at all satisfied with their lives, so they resolve to do something about it.
I expected a traditional crime thriller, but this was something far superior. Every time you think you can see how the movie is going to finish, it does an about-face and makes you reconsider your options. I like a movie that does that, and speaking frankly, it's getting ever more unusual to see a movie coming out of Hollywood that does that.
Yeah, I'd like to say at this point that this is a cinematic debut. I mean, a Hollywood debut for the director Oscar de la Pena, who is a renowned Argentinian director. He brings something very raw and fresh to the screen, and I just hope that isn't Hollywoodized out of him in his next movies.
De la Pena's direction is something which contributes to the overall feel of this movie. But I would also like to mention the screenwriter, Joyce Cook, who adapted this from the best-selling novel of the same name, a book which was published some 12 years ago. I understand that De La Pena really pushed for Miami, and there is definitely a real, authentic Latin flavor to the film. I think we just get fed up of watching either New York, L.A., or possibly Chicago on our screens all the time.
Sally, who's in this one?
There's only one recognizable name that all our listeners will be familiar with, and that is Greg Bailey, who plays the long-suffering cop who's put onto the case. I think he was parachuted into the movie to give it at least a little star appeal, but, to be honest, the film would have survived perfectly well without him. It's that strong. Greg gives a good, strong performance, but I would say the absolute star of the film is little Pedro Martin, the 7-year-old victim of the kidnap that becomes the central theme of the movie in the second half.
You know, when I came out of the viewing of this movie, I was talking to Sally about how I had to find out how many films for South American cinema this little Pedro had done, because I was convinced we were talking about someone who had at least 5 or 6 other films on his resume. Then the research guys tell me that he's a resident of Miami, where the movie was shot, and his only previous acting experience was about 20 minutes on a sitcom for Spanish language TV down in Miami.
Wow, that's incredible.
I heard that De La Pena saw this kid on TV and absolutely had to have him in, at least for an audition.
Okay, we've reached the moment for your final verdicts on these 2 movies. First of all, Helter Skelter. What did you think? As always, a 1-sentence summing up and a score out of 10.
High potential, but misses the laughs. 6 out of 10.
And for timeout, Jonathan?
Fresh-faced movie. Delivers what it promises. 8 out of 10.
Jonathan Reed and Sally Mendes, thank you both very much for coming in this evening. It's nice to see you both agreeing with each other for once. We look forward to seeing you at the same time next week. Now, my next guest has been involved in cinema for about...
Joining me here on Book Choice this week is Janet Stilton. She won the prestigious San Diego Fiction Prize 2 years ago for her debut novel, Standing Still So Fast. Her new novel, Changed, is coming out on Friday, and she joins us today to talk about her new work. Janet, welcome, and first of all, I must say, you're looking wonderful today, as bright as a button.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Keith. I don't feel as bright as a button. We've been doing a lot of publicity for the new book, and of course that will take off in a real sense after the Friday launch.
Where is the official launch going to be?
We're doing it at the New York Central Library, which I was absolutely thrilled about, because I spent so much of my childhood within those hallowed walls. It will be a really special occasion for me, and of course for all those who turn up. We're hoping for a good crowd.
It must all seem a long way off from the small-scale launch of Standing Still So Fast. I believe you did that in a small bookstore in Harlem. How the world has changed for you, and so fast.
Yes, I have a good friend who runs an independent bookstore in Harlem, and it was a very low-key thing. It seems like decades ago, but it was about 3 years ago. Incredible to think about that now.
No television cameras back then? No New York Times?
No, it was just about 20 people who came to hear me read a few extracts. There was a kindly girl from a local literature publication, another blogger. That was it. We just drank coffee and ate a few cookies.
There are, we know on this show as much as anyone, so many authors young and struggling along at the base of the pyramid, doing book launches like yourself those 3 long years ago, reading extracts to literally tens of people. It must be an enthralling experience to be plucked out of that and thrown into a very different world, into the New York Central Library, no less.
The San Diego Fiction Prize changed everything. It changed my life. Just to be nominated was a world-altering experience. We were selling about 10 copies a day of Standing Still So Fast. The reviews were wonderful, yes, but without that glare of publicity, without its light shining on you, you're always going to struggle. When the nomination for the San Diego Prize was announced, I never thought I had a shot in a million at winning it. There were 5 other very talented writers on the shortlist. But even then, my sales shot through the roof and we were shifting hundreds a day. I got to peek even then through the curtain into this other world where sales are measured with a few extra zeros.
And what now of your friend's niche bookstore in Harlem? Do you have any plans to do any further readings there of your new novel?
Well, it's funny you say that, because that's precisely what I intend to do. I really love those intimate events where you can get to know the readers, hear their thoughts on my work. I don't want to leave that behind. So yes, there will be some big fancy launch events for the new book, but some smaller things too.
You said this was a painful book to write. Why was that? Are you talking about the famous second album difficulty that so many bands are supposed to face?
No, it was nothing like that. Well, my first book, Standing Still So Fast, that was something domestic. The mental abuse, torture really, of a very ordinary woman within a relationship. For Changed, I actually take that as my starting point, but take the story to a very different place.
Is it autobiographical?
Oh, now that's a very hard question to ask. I think the best way to describe it is to say it's biographical for millions of women out there.
The protagonist, who has the wonderful name of Lucy Dew, is a tough cookie, isn't she?
She's been living in my head for a long time. I created her about 10 years ago.
10 years ago?
Oh, yes. My head is very crowded, and I tell you, they don't all get along.
Why didn't you write about Lucy Dew in your first novel?
Because Linda Del Monte was a better scrapper, and she escaped from my head first. She was just a larger-than-life personality, and I felt a few years ago this fierce, burning desire to tell her story. Her place on the stage was ready, but now it's certainly Lucy Dew's turn.
Where do these characters come from? I've had so many writers here on the show, and it is something I ask a lot. The font of all these incredible people. Writers find their inspiration from so many different sources.
To be honest, the catalyst was actually a sad-looking woman I saw in a supermarket one day. Just a glance, an impression of something, that's often all it takes. And then the person becomes a living organism in your head, and you play with them, test them with questions, moral dilemmas, things like that. What would that wretched woman do if her husband left her? If she won the lottery? If she accidentally killed someone with her car? That type of thing.
And do you have to like them?
Oh, goodness, no. They do need to be interesting, capable of change. Yes, that is important. But no, likable is not a necessary characteristic. Believable, capable of producing sympathy or empathy in the reader, able to communicate something. All of these things are vital.
Now, without giving anything away of your new novel, what could you tell our listeners about Changed?
I think this book speaks to the dreamer in all of us, and I don't mean exclusively women in that respect.
This is a book for everyone, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, the protagonist in this case happens to be a woman, but there are universal issues being dealt with in the novel. The ordinary person, the everyday passerby, the woman sitting on the bus, the one you never look at, the one who creates a very limited impression on those that come into contact with her, even in many cases her own family.
And of course, deeply unhappy.
Yes, she's out of her mind with the dreary dullness of her life, and she decides to do something about it, to actually make that leap of faith. And she becomes, in ways she couldn't have expected, as the title of the book suggests, changed.
Before we finish, I'd just like to ask you what you yourself like to read. What is on the Janet Stilton Kindle or bookshelf?
Definitely bookshelf. I haven't gotten into the whole cyber book thing, whatever you call it. I'm like a sponge when I write, often mimicking the style of whichever author is my current favorite. That's quite dangerous when you're a writer. I was actually reading a lot of Stephen King last year, and I noticed in my own writing, in the first draft of Changed, many more shadows and unexplained creaks than I would normally have. It's a sort of osmosis, going from his writing into mine. I've always done that. There was an entire section of the manuscript I had to scrap. It read like something out of the Twilight Zone. But yes, I do like my thrillers and horrors. And anything fantasy, I'll lose myself in for days on end. That's when my editor starts calling and complaining about deadlines.
Well, speaking of deadlines, unfortunately, we too have run out of time. You can find Changed in all good bookstores, And if you happen to be near the New York Central Library on Friday, I'm sure Janet will be delighted to see you.
I absolutely will.
Thank you for visiting us today, Janet. Best of luck with the launch.
Thanks, Keith.
Dan's a real gossip. It's not something you'd expect looking at him. He loves his sports, and there he'll be chatting away about last night's game, all of it going right over my head, of course. Then he'll just slip in something about Liz in human resources. I guess that's why I listen to whatever he says so attentively. He must think I'm crazy about sports. Or him. My word, I never thought about that. I think he sees himself as an informal news service within the office. He's never malicious or nasty. He just passes on information. One girl told him something, knowing that it would be around the office by lunchtime. We should be paying him, really.
Melissa's like the favourite aunt to everybody in the office. There's about a dozen of us and she's been here the longest. She has such a wise head on her shoulders. She won't tell you she disapproves of something you've done, but she'll gently suggest alternative courses of action. And you know, later on, at home perhaps, you realise that what she said was absolutely what you should have done. I think she's godmother to about 4 of the girls' kids. And every birthday, she's there with something that isn't necessarily showy or expensive, but has had a world of thought put into it.
Clara is the office squirrel. Every office I've worked in has had one. She has a little cache of nuts in a drawer, or chocolate peanuts, or raisins. It seems to be something different each week. A few weeks back, it was dried banana slices. I could smell them from 5 desks away. Her hand's in that drawer more often than it's on the keyboard. No, that's unfair. She's a good worker, and you know what? There isn't an ounce of fat on that girl. I don't know where she puts it all. Maybe she doesn't eat anything at home, or spends most of her free time on the treadmill in the gym.
Christopher is a funny one. He's a terrific worker. Probably works harder than anyone else. We work on telephone support, and you never know when the next call is coming in. What he's doing is, between calls, he's writing a play. It sounds incredible, doesn't it? He's been at it for months. He might only get a minute to write before the next angry customer's on the phone, so this play is inching forward so slowly, line by line. I can't wait till it's finished. I have no idea when that may be. He probably doesn't either. It's such a stressful job we have with random strangers yelling at us for little or no reason. It must be such a release for him to be able to write. Maybe he pours all his anger into it. Hello, Monica. Where were you yesterday?
Hi, William. My grandmother passed away. We were at the hospital all day.
Oh no, that's terrible. Were you close to her?
Yes, I was quite close to her. My mother died when I was young, and she became almost like a substitute mother for me. I'm really going to miss her.
She must have been quite old.
84. She had a long life, and she wasn't ill for long, thankfully. I heard this morning that I'm going to inherit her house.
I thought she lived in a small apartment in town.
Yes, she did, but she kept the old house near the lake. It became too big for her to look after, but that house has been in our family for about 5 generations. She would never have sold it.
All those houses near the lake are very old. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to sell it?
No way! I could never sell my grandmother's house. I don't know. I think it's my responsibility to repair the place and pass it on to my children.
That's a good way of looking at it. There must be a lot of work to do on it, though.
There really is. My brother said he'll help with the expense. I used to spend all my summers in that house. We'd get up at 7 in the morning and have a swim before breakfast. I actually met my husband while fishing there. It holds a lot of special memories for me. I really want to get it looking how it used to, back to its former splendor.
What do you know about building and decoration? Will you do it yourself or have someone work on it for you?
I can handle a paintbrush, but not much more than that.
What needs doing to it? When did you last see it?
About 2 years ago, and it was in terrible condition.
Is the roof okay? In these old houses, that can be the most expensive thing.
We had the roof totally redone about 6 years ago, so I think that's one thing we won't have to have looked at.
Is there a garden?
I wouldn't use the word garden. There's a big plot of land out the back, but it's all overgrown. We'll have to have the grass cut back and the trees pruned. There's a big old hole where a pond used to be, and we'll have to have that filled in. It's pretty dangerous.
Is the house secure? Are all the doors in good condition? It's a risk having a house standing empty for so long.
Yeah, you're right. All the doors are fine, but we'll have to have some of the windows fixed. There's a few broken ones upstairs. Some kids got into the house last year.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, it didn't do too much damage, fortunately. I think they were just looking for a bit of adventure. We had all the locks changed, and it's been alright ever since.
There must be some great historical features in such an old property.
The wooden staircase is just breathtaking. We're going to have it restored because a lot of the steps are pretty rotten now, and the banister isn't safe at all. But with a bit of love and a lot of money, it'll be like something out of Gone with the Wind.
Well, it doesn't sound so bad, Monica. You'll have to invite me round to see the place when you get it fixed up.
Of course, and if you know how to use a hammer and a screwdriver, you're always welcome to come round sooner.
Hey Steve, how did your lessons go this morning?
Usual mix, really. Year 8 history was torture, and they played a trick on me at the start of the lesson. They must have been planning it for weeks.
Oh, too bad. I had them right after you for English, and it was like they were in a different world. I couldn't get them to focus for the first 10 minutes. They might have been too busy thinking about you, their long-suffering teacher, planning their next practical joke.
Either that or they're already thinking about Christmas.
Huh, that's strange.
What?
Actually, I can't believe that.
What is it, Marcia?
I put a chocolate cake in this fridge when I got to school this morning. It was for my Year 4 class because they finished a huge project this week, and they've done really well.
And it's gone?
Not all of it, but a huge slice of it has. Who would do that in a school staff room? It's incredible. I can't bring a half-eaten cake into my class, can I?
Someone must have seen who it was. There's always someone here, isn't there?
Not on a Friday morning. Only half the teachers are here today. No, there can't have been anyone here most of the morning. Well, just one person. But who? It must have been Helen. She's always taking things out of that fridge.
Marcia, that's not fair. She's always putting things in the fridge too. It can't have been Helen anyway. I think she's outside the school today with her chemistry class. They've gone to a laboratory in Middleton. What about Donald? He always likes his mid-morning snacks, doesn't he? He might have taken a bit of your cake, perhaps without thinking.
Sweet old Donald? No, he wouldn't steal cake from the fridge. He was here when I arrived this morning. He must have seen me put it in there. He knew it was mine. It can't have been him.
Your friend Michelle is here today, isn't she?
She can't have eaten my cake, Steve. She's getting married in February.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
She's been on a crazy diet for 3 months. She might have eaten some celery this morning, but not any chocolate cake. And she's my friend, and she knew I'd bought that cake for my Year 4 class.
What about that new teacher? What's his name? Nick, is it? Or Nigel?
Neil.
Yes. When we went to our classes at 9 o'clock, he was still here, sitting in that corner.
Ah, yes, I remember. He can't have had any classes today.
No, he told me he was here just doing some paperwork. He said he was leaving before lunch.
Neil must have taken my cake. I'm going to see the boss about this. Cake thieves will not be tolerated. Hi, Dennis. What have you got there?
Hello, Amber. It's my new e-book reader.
Let me have a look. It's nice, really elegant looking, but I don't think I could ever use one.
Why not?
Oh, I don't know. It doesn't seem right to me. Books shouldn't be read on small machines like that. I'd never get used to it.
It took me some time, I admit. You should try it, Amber. I used to be so sceptical about new technology. Now, I'd be lost without my little e-book reader.
Don't you miss the feel of a real book, the smell of it?
Not especially. And you know, I saw some place the other day selling a little bottle of spray that you could spray onto your e-book reader, onto the back of it. It was called Real Book Aroma. Can you believe that?
That's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. But you do understand what I'm saying, don't you? There's a romance about real books. The glossy covers, the blurb on the back, folding over a page to remember where you are. All of that. Don't you miss that?
A lot of people just don't like progress, I guess. I'm sure the first people to see real books said that stories should be told by storytellers and heard by attentive listeners around a blazing fire. Things change.
Well, how does it work? Isn't it like reading a big PDF document on your laptop? When I have to do that at work, my eyes get so tired. I can't imagine what it would be like to read an entire Jane Austen novel in that way.
No, it's nothing like that. I thought that it was, but then my cousin, Tim, showed me his one last year, and I was totally sold on it. I had to get one. There isn't a light on it like a laptop or a cell phone has, so it doesn't tire your eyes.
Doesn't that mean you can't read in the dark?
That's right. It's like a normal book. You can buy a little light to clip onto it if you want. They have this special thing called e-ink, and on the screen, look, it's just like words on a page in any book you've got.
Huh, I never realized that. Don't you find yourself turning over the whole thing when you get to the end of the page? That would drive me insane.
Yeah, I admit, I did do that a few times at the beginning.
How do you put books on it? I suppose you have to fiddle around with memory sticks and USB cables, don't you?
You can do that if you want. I just buy books for it online, and they get delivered straight to the reader.
By email?
Yeah, sort of. You just need a Wi-Fi connection.
It sounds a bit complicated.
It really isn't.
I just don't have the time to read what I used to before starting this job. I would read 2 or 3 books every month, and now I can't even remember the last time I picked up a new book.
That's because it's just not convenient dragging around heavy hardback books with you. Who's got time for that? With this thing, I take all my books with me, and it weighs nothing, the same as a newspaper probably.
How many books have you got stored in there?
1,200.
You're kidding me, 1,200 books?
And it's so convenient. I take this thing out whenever I've got a few minutes to kill. On the bus, in a cab, in the dentist's waiting room, you name it.
You're doing a good job of convincing me.
Listen, I'm going out of town for a couple of days. I'll leave this e-book reader with you. It's got the latest Grisham novel on it, the one you said you wanted to read. See if you get on with it, if you like it.
Would you do that?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks a lot, Dennis. I can't wait to see what it's like.